So we initially had built out a tool called the Municipal Navigator, right? Which is core functionality was all about helping citizens navigate municipal services. But just this week, FEMA dropped its new website where it lists over 76 programs related to disaster relief. And our core functionality, right, helping citizens navigate services, suited this problem perfectly. And we felt that it was important to solve it and try to help people immediately who have been impacted by the disasters over the last few weeks, right? Hurricane Helene, Milton, and many more have hit many regions across America, and millions have been impacted. I'll use the example of Jesse Craig, whose family's house was hit by multiple landslides, and the Craig family in Fairview, North Carolina, actually ended up losing 11 members, which is not only a tragedy, but what happened after was just as challenging for the family as for almost the past month. There's been no running water. There's been no drinking water. There's been no cell service. There's been no Wi-Fi. And those in North Carolina have had to band together and work as hard as possible as a community to navigate these challenging times. Now, FEMA is providing services and grants and funding to help this community rebuild, but it is so challenging to navigate, especially for those with low digital literacy. 76 different programs, right? So the damage from these types of disasters is only increasing. Over the past 60 odd years, there's been about a tenfold increase in the number of natural disasters occurring across the world. At the same time, these disasters result in a huge amount of damages, right? Almost $1 trillion has been lost in terms of damages over the past 6 years from 137 disasters in the US alone, right? You heard that correctly, $1 trillion in damages. And it only gets worse, as I mentioned, after the storm. Families are left without drinking water. In North Carolina, they actually just got running water, right? So they're able to flush their toilets and shower, but they're still unable to drink from the tap. At the same time, there was about 30 to 50 billion dollars in damages as a result of these hurricanes. And right now, only 300 million dollars of the funds allocated from FEMA towards helping with the rebuild across Georgia, North Carolina, and other afflicted regions has been dispersed. And that's not because FEMA is in any way trying to stop it, right? FEMA is doing its best. The civil servants are trying as hard as possible. However, they're limited by humans being able to access these programs effectively. As I mentioned, there's 76 different programs that citizens have to navigate, right? And it's not just disaster related programs. Programs are generally hard to access for the average human, right? 63% of people eligible for food stamps, which are essentially just free food on a credit card for those who are eligible, actually access it. And at the same time, those who do access these types of government services often rate their experience as poor or very poor, right? And this isn't due to civil servants. This is due to a lack of capacity to serve, as well as bad technology. And so that is why we created the Disaster Navigator to help navigate these 76 federal programs through one simple guide. Essentially, what we've done is scrape the data from the FEMA site, highlighting and capturing all of the eligibility requirements and program definitions included on their documentation. We connected that to our RAG pipeline and general system we had built out for the Navigator for municipalities. We've linked this to Twilio to allow SMS and texting capability. And now any citizen in any of the areas impacted can text and navigate through these programs in a queryable chatbot manner rather than having to navigate through 76 different program websites. The Navigator saves citizens time and effort, helping with program navigation, enabling multi-language support because there's hundreds of thousands of the millions of people who are afflicted by the hurricanes, who English is their second language before. And we all know how complex and challenging it is to navigate government. Imagine doing it in your second language. And at the same time, the third and most consequential of the capabilities of this tool is that anyone, anywhere can text it, right? And there's so many people who right now don't have access to internet and maybe only have SMS capability. So the Navigator user experience is quite simple. The user can ask what programs they can apply to. The Navigator will confirm their eligibility based on a set of questions identified on the FEMA website. The Navigator will then provide the relevant information. And finally, the Navigator learns from feedback from the users as to next steps. I would note that one of the biggest challenges for us here was extracting data from the FEMA website, which I'll let Akash speak more about.
Thank you, Joe. With regards to data, you know that data is everywhere, right? So you have data from government portals, you have data from open data portals, you have data from federal, state, nonprofit, and we can go on. Next slide, please. So we know that data and even LLM models, they come out in all shape and size and structures. So to deal with this, we have unstructured data, semi-structured data, and structured data. Next slide, please. And when we think about this, we often think about RAG pipeline. And often when we think about RAG pipeline, we only plug in vector databases. But vector databases are good for chunk or like unstructured data, but it might not be really good for structured data or tabular data. And these government requirement documents, these services, these can be like tabular data, could be semi-structured data, and so on. So we take these data from these different portals, we ingest them in our data storage service. This could be VB8 for vector data for vector database capabilities, DynamoDB for storing metadata. We dump our raw data that we scrape from these websites in S3, and then we store our structured data in RDS. Next slide, please. So now let's look at the functional architecture. So we have a user interface, a user sends a query. We have a data processing layer where the LangChain orchestrator talks to different storage layers. We have a LangGraph agent, which makes sure that it can perform various transformation operations. And then we have monitoring and evaluation to ensure that we're performing well, the queries are doing well, and how can we serve better to the citizens. Next slide, please. So now let's look at the system level architecture. In terms of system level architecture, we have a user sends a message to the messaging service and then gets back. But what happens in between? So now we have a lot of users, right? So we have an identity service. So this is where we try to identify a unique person's number and see, okay, are they a registered user? Are they a new user? And based on them, we can give them services accordingly. If they are not an existing user, we'll check whether it's an existing conversation. So we use Redis for having user data, states, and conversation memory. Now we proceed into the information gathering state. So here we're ensuring that we have all the required information from the user before we can actually answer to them. So once we have gathered all that information, we go to our service locator where we have our LangChain, LangGraph, and LangSmith coming together to make a query to our data storage service, generate the answer, and then send it back to the user. Now I'll share my screen and we'll go do a demo. Yeah. So here's my WhatsApp. So let me just talk to this agent here. So hello. So okay, hi, I'm Navigator. I can help you with find federal assistance programs. Okay, I don't know why this. Okay. You may search for it, just answer a quick question to get started. Are you looking for assistance for individuals or businesses? Businesses. Okay. Next, it asks you what type of information am I looking for? So let me ask for business disaster loans. So while this is happening, what's happening is basically we're talking to our data storage service. We're performing a SQL job right now, and then we're going to query the response. So here we have a response. So we have an agency. We know who is providing the service. We have a program description of what the program is. We know who's eligible. We know what the application process is, and we also know who to contact and reach for. What if I am missing a family member and I want to know how to reach out to them? So let me ask that as well. I'm missing a family member. How can I find them? And yes, so it answers the question and gives you the official website recommended by FEMA on how to tackle this problem. Same thing that a lot of people face in this difficult crisis situation is people do experience fraud and scams. So how should I be careful about fraud and scams? So again, it just goes to the FEMA website, what we have data on it, and it will give you answers accordingly to the website. Yeah. So it's always so it's important to be vigilant, and this is exactly the FEMA guidelines that have been provided by the FEMA website. So I'll pass it back to Joe to end this off.
Yeah, and so as you can see from this tool, we're just trying to help out in the community. Once it's launched, we'd love you to share it with anyone you know in any of the areas impacted by these disasters, and we look forward to hearing your feedback on the tool.